All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, after winning the first two games of their series against the Indiana Pacers at home, the New York Knicks headed to Indianapolis feeling good about themselves for games three and four. And if you're the Knicks, you figured, you know what, let's try to get at least a split in Indiana against these Pacers in order to put them on the brink of elimination. And of course, you'd be one step closer to punching your ticket for your franchise's first trip to the Eastern Conference Finals since 2000. But to quote the late, oh, pardon me, forgive me for that part, but just to quote Lee Corso, okay, because he's still with us. The Pacers simply said, not so fast, my friends, okay? And after winning a very close game in game three, 111 to 106. The Pacers exploded today as they smoked the Knicks 121 to 89. And honestly, the final score wasn't even indicative of that. Okay. Indiana just jumped on the Knicks in the first quarter, and it was just like the barrage continued. And right after one quarter, the Knicks found themselves down by 20 and then down by 28 at the half. And of course, the hits just kept on coming if you're Indiana. So now, if you look at this thing, things have really changed this weekend, okay? Because people after game two were like, you know what, the Knicks have got this X, Y, and Z. Guess what? I figured this series is going to be tough, and it's proving to be that way as Indiana has shown resiliency. They've protected the home court. They have not lost at home so far in this postseason. And now this series is knotted at two games apiece. You look at the injuries for the Knicks that they're dealing with right now. No OG Ananobi as he missed games three and four with that hamstring injury. Iffy for game five. The Knicks are going to need him, okay? But not having him out there has clearly taken away from their depth. You look at Jalen Brunson, to his credit, he is trying to play through injury right now. No Mitchell Robinson is big for the Knicks because, he was one of their rim protectors. So now Isaiah Hartenstein is being asked to do more. And then, of course, the Knicks, for basically the bulk of the season, have not had Julius Randle. And, of course, prior to the start of this postseason, no Bogdan Bogdanovic. But aside from all of that, you look at this Pacers team right now, they have a ton of confidence, okay? And they're going to have plenty of confidence heading back to Madison Square Garden for game number five in this series. They've won their last two, yes. But then also, games one and two at the Garden were very close. Indiana had double digit leads in the second half of both games one and game number two, and they could not put it away. Now, after game two, some might call Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle a whiner, okay, after he publicly complained about the refs, talking about, the league doesn't want small market teams to win X, Y, and Z. But you know what? There was a method to that madness because typically we see it in the postseason in the NBA. When coaches are not getting the calls that they make that they want, they'll go out there and publicly criticize the officials. And Phil Jackson and Pat Riley were masters of this. Okay. If their team got down 2-1 in a series or it was 2-2 and they lost game four, and of course, in those days, it was the first round going to game number five or just game five in a best of seven series, whatever. Okay. Jackson Riley were infamous for criticizing those refs. And guess what? They would pay that $25,000 fine that the NBA would levy. And then guess what? They turn around the very next game and all of the calls that they want, they would get. And of course, in my opinion, we saw, especially in game number three, we saw Indiana and Carlisle get the calls that they wanted. It really didn't matter today in game number four. But nonetheless, the tenor of this series has shifted. So you look at it and you ask, why did the momentum of this series shift? First of all, I think Indiana is a better home team. They were 26 and 15 at home this year. And of course, like I said, they are 5-0 so far in this postseason. One adjustment, Rick Carlisle trusting a guy like TJ McConnell off that bench a little bit more. He's a veteran. He's very feisty. He doesn't stop moving, and it's one of those where he brings a certain level when he's on the court for Indiana. And I think we've seen it throughout this entire series when McConnell has played, but now Carlisle is trusting him a little bit more in those key moments. Getting everybody involved on offense has been big for Indiana, and I think they have to stick with that plan heading into Game 5. Something else that Indiana needs to do, they're not known as a defensive team, as a good defensive team. I'm going to touch on that in a moment. But Indiana is going to have to keep pushing the narrative. Their offense has to be their defense. Why? Because right now you got a depleted and injured New York Knicks team. You have to push the tempo. Indiana has a young team. They're very athletic. Don't worry about the half court sets. You know what? At this point, get those thoroughbreds out there in space and let them do what they do. Okay. But then at the defensive end, you saw it from the beginning of Game 3. The Pacers are they're not going to make it as easy for Jalen Brunson. They're basically saying, you know what, somebody else is going to have to beat us. And, you go back the games 1 and 2 at the Garden. It was the Villanova Knicks, the combination that was going out there and doing things. That has not been the case. We saw DiVincenzo have the big Game 3, but nonetheless, they have not allowed all three of them to get off. And a lot of that is they have changed how they're going to play Jalen Brunson. You're not going to just let him bring the ball up and let him operate. They're going to have to make him work. So, in turn, the Knicks are going to have to make some adjustments now, get going in the Game 5. And it's going to be very interesting because historically, Tom Thibodeau is not a guy who has excelled at making adjustments. I really want to see what type of adjustments that the Knicks are going to try to make. Will they just try to simply match the Pacers and speed things up? We got to wait and see. But nonetheless, a lot of that is predicated on Brunson creating offense for this team. And to the Pacers' credit, they have found a way to slow him down. And if you slow him down, you slow things down for the Knicks offense. But I'll tell you right now, this Pacers team has a lot of confidence. They're not going to be intimidated by going back to Madison Square Garden for game number 5. I will say this: the Knicks crowd, okay, is going to do whatever they can and then some to try to will this team to a Game 5 victory. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, which has been the case coming down the stretch of the regular season and, of course, into this postseason for the New York Knicks. I said this series was going 6 at the beginning, and I gave the edge to the Knicks. The way things are going right now, it would not surprise me to see this thing go 7. This Pacers team they're flying high right now. Okay, and of course you got to feel great. After you've tied the series up, you've protected your home court. But now, if you're Indiana, you're saying, you know what, we let a couple get away at the Garden. Let's go back and try to steal one once more for game number 5. I expected this series to be great. It's looking that way. And of course, a best of 7 is now a best of 3. So let's see which of these teams is going to, find a way to get that edge to get game number 5. What's going on? Latrell Sprewell is the American dream. Excuse me. Pacers are lucky OG isn't healthy. I'll tell you like this. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, him not being there really changed the tenor, from the Knicks' perspective, especially from their depth and especially from what he was doing uh, for them on the perimeter. And it's one of those things. The Knicks have been dealing with the injury bug for quite some time, but I think that Anunoby injury is big. And then also Brunson getting tweaked up earlier in this series is not helping things as well. So it's going to be interesting to see when the Knicks can get OG Anunoby back, because at this point, he right now his status is iffy for game number 5, and of course, iffy is better than what it's been, in the first couple of games, and well, not first couple of games of games 3 and 4, because he was just listed as out. You're asking me, do I think the Knicks can still win this series? I think they can. Okay, it's one of those. They're going to have to make some adjustments, and they're going to have to fight scrap and claw. And what they have to do, um, they might want to slow this thing down, because the Pacers right now, especially due to the injuries for the Knicks, they have more depth. Okay, and that's something right now that is changing this thing. And the Pacers were, as much as I got on Indiana coming into this series as far as being one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, they're also one of the better offensive teams in the NBA. And I think that has been shown throughout this series. And it's one of those where I'm not going to call them the Showtime Lakers, but when these boys get out there in transition, you know what? They're off to the races. Halliburton can run. Miles Turner can get up and down the court. Of course, Pascal Siakam can get up and down the court as well. And we saw those fresh legs of Indiana be a problem for an injury riddled and older Milwaukee Bucks team in round number one. And I think now it's carrying over to this series against the Knicks. And again, it's one of those where, yes, the Knicks did hold serve at Madison Square Garden in games one and two, but it's not like they blew out the Pacers. It's one of those where Indiana basically, had both of those games and that was it. But I'll tell you like this, man, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I'm not sure how long that you've been a Knicks fan, but I will say this. It's one of those where if you've watched the Knicks play this year, you definitely, from a fan's perspective, you know, you feel like this is your year, and you're saying you've been watching them for 25 years. So I'll tell you like this: you've probably seen, more heartache then you have had success because clearly the 2000s were not great to the Knickerbockers. Okay. You think about all of the bad moves, and it started, with Isaiah Thomas, running things in the front office. And of course, the Knicks were a train wreck. Got Carmelo in the 2010s, gave you some hope, won a playoff series, but still, it wasn't a lot of, playoff success, so to speak. And then, of course, now um, things have gotten better. And if you're the Knicks, and if you're a Knicks fan, you get to this point and you're just like, oh no, not again. So it's one of those where hopefully, for their sake, some home cooking can do the trick. Like I said, the fans at MSG are definitely going to try to be a rallying cry for this team. I don't know if you're going to be in attendance there personally, but nonetheless, it's one of those where I think the fans would definitely be, do whatever they have to do to try to will this team to win. I've been at the Garden before for Knicks games, and I'll tell you like this: it is an electric and it's a special atmosphere. Okay, so definitely the Knicks are going to try to feed off of that. But one thing that's going to hurt them here at least is, now things are getting more condensed in the postseason. One day off and you're playing. So, like when you're dealing with injuries like they currently are, it makes it a little bit tougher to get guys back into the rotation. And just for what it's worth, sake of argument, let's say OG Ananobi is able to go in game number five for New York. He's not going to be 100% if he's out there. And I guarantee you, Indiana's going to try to test him on that. And honestly, for what it's worth, at this point with a hamstring injury, you really can't count on him in this series again if you're the Knicks because he's probably not going to be 100%. So, but even if he's 75%, that would still, in my opinion, be a boost for this team. You're saying part of the problem with Brunson's injury is the way they guard him. We usually let Hartenstein catch it, and Brunson comes off a million picks and he gets the ball back out, but he's not moving great. Listen, it's all about speed and your ability to move around and get to the basket and create for your opponent. I mean, for your teammates. If you're Jalen Brunson, and of course, right now, he's limited in that. And the thing is, as Jalen Brunson goes, so do the fortunes of the New York Knicks. You figure, he's been well schooled, first of all, by his dad, in that, well schooled by Jay Wright during his time at Villanova, as far as being an excellent ball handler, getting to the basket, penetrating, and setting things up for his teammates. And of course, right now, the injury situation definitely limits that. And the Pacers, to their credit, they're exploiting that because what the Pacers, especially today, they just sped the Knicks up. And the Knicks on the Tibbs, they've been a good defensive team, and it's one of those where let's see how it breaks down. You're saying the Knicks are 26-5 when OG plays, 13-16 when he doesn't. Does that 13 and 16, does that count for, are you counting the postseason, or is that just for the regular season right there with that 13 and 16? Okay. All right. So yeah, like listen, he's been a tremendous asset, and credit to both the Knicks and the Raptors. Pardon, the Knicks and the Raptors, the Knicks and the Pacers, for going out there. When the Raptors threw up the towel on this season and said, you know what, we're going to get some of your better guys. Of course, we saw the Pacers get Siakam. We saw the Knicks get OG Ananobi. And of course, both of these guys have been vital in towards both of these teams getting to this point. But I'll tell you like this: I've talked overall about the Knicks Pacers rivalry historically, and I think this series, in my opinion, okay, would make the guys that played in the 90s in this playoff rivalry very proud, because we've seen some physicality. It's gotten chippy, you name it. And a guy like Tyrese Haliburton, in my opinion, he's kind of embraced being booed by the crowd at Madison Square Garden, a la Reggie Miller. I'm not calling Tyrese Haliburton Reggie Miller, but nonetheless, it's one of those where, you know what, it's kind of a throwback, in some kind of senses, to the Pacers Knicks rivalry of yesteryear. But nonetheless, I think that the intensity in this series has been tremendous. The intensity for these entire NBA playoffs as a whole has been pretty good. Okay. But just coming back here to this next series with the Pacers, I think it's been tremendous. I think Madison Square Garden is going to be electric for game 5. And honestly, at this point, I'm going to call it a toss up. It would not surprise me to see Indiana go in there and get game 5. It wouldn't surprise me to see the Knicks, hold serve at home. But what I think the Knicks need to do, okay, they need to try to go out there early on in game number 5. They've got to try to make a statement the way that Indiana just made a statement today, because you know what? You got punched in the mouth if you're the Knicks, and you got steamrolled early on. And when you're down 20 early on after one quarter, especially, with the Depletions in the ranks, it kind of changes how you go out there and do things. And especially when you're down by 28 or 29 points at the half on the road. Okay, you know what? Whatever game plan that you came into that contest with is out of the window. So I'm sure Tibbs and his staff, probably on the flight back home this evening, have been at work trying to strategize to get this team healthy, better uh, suited, if you will, for game number 5. But then also, you've got to try to get guys as healthy as possible. So, nonetheless, I think this series is going, like I said, it was going to be a good one coming in. It has not surprised me. 6 games definitely at this point, but it would not surprise me to have a 7th game at Madison Square Garden at the rate that they're going. But nonetheless, New York held serve in games 1 and 2 at the Garden. The Pacers return the favor. Now we've got a best of 3 series. Who has what it takes to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals? Only time will tell. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Latrell Sprewell is the American dream. I love that handle. Okay, I truly do. Thank you for chiming in this evening. I appreciate what you had to add to this. And I'll be doing this again throughout the postseason. So definitely, please do not be a stranger. And I'll definitely be talking towards the end of this series, regardless of which team is able to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals from this one. And I would definitely love to hear what you have to say on the matter. And once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And also out there, a special salute to all of the mothers out there on this Mother's Day, especially to my wonderful wife who takes care of our kids. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up once again. Not to sound like a broken record, but I'm signing off this time and saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.